Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Students, today we are going to go through the last and final part of the chapter Silk Road, which is a beautiful travelogue talking about the narrator's journey to Mount Kailash. And here we are at the last stop, the town of Darchan, from where the narrator has to go to Mount Kailash. He was having some physical issues and they were treated very well by the doctor. And let us see what happens afterward. Once he saw that I was going to live, Chetan left me to return to Lhasa. As a Buddhist, he told me he knew that it didn't really matter if I passed away, but he thought it would be bad for business. So for Chetan, even if the narrator would have passed away because of his condition, the physical condition, it doesn't matter because of Buddhism, as Buddhism believes that life is only a part of a higher or a longer journey of the soul. But as far as a businessman was concerned, for him it would be really bad if his traveler, if his client would have died during the journey. Darchan didn't look so horrible after a good night's sleep. It was still dusty, partially derelict, and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse. But the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of the Himalayas, commanded by a huge snow-capped mountain, Gurla Mandhata, with just a wisp of cloud suspended over its summit. So from this town of Darchan, which was not very different from Hor, with dirt all over, dust all over, but still maybe better than Hor. From this place, he could clearly see the beautiful mountain Gurla Mandhata, which is the highest peak of the Nalakankar Himal, a small sub-range of the Himalaya. The town had a couple of rudimentary general stores selling Chinese cigarettes, soap and other basic provisions, as well as the usual strings of prayer flags. In front of one, men gathered in the afternoon for a game of pool, the battered table looking supremely incongruous in the open air, while nearby women washed their long hair in the icy water of a narrow brook that babbled down past my guest house. So he is actually showing the simple life of the people there. It was a very beautiful place, undoubtedly situated amidst the beautiful mountains of Himalaya. The air was clean, the sky was clear, and the people, the simple people of that town, they were enjoying their time. The men were playing a pool of game on a battered table. A battered table looks like this, and that is why it was completely incongruous with the scenery outside. The scenery was so beautiful, but the table was so ugly and broken. Darchan felt relaxed and unhurried, but for me, it came with a significant drawback. There were no pilgrims. Now, for the narrator, it was a huge drawback because there were no pilgrims. And for going forward, he needed a group, somebody at least. He could not go alone. It was a difficult journey. It was not to be taken up from any vehicle. Either he had to go on foot or he had to hire some yak. And for that, he needed at least one person as a companion. I had been told that at the height of the pilgrimage season, the town was bustling with visitors. Many brought their own accommodation, enlarging the settlement round its edges as they set up their tents, which spilled down onto the plain. I had timed my arrival for the beginning of the season, but it seemed I was too early. So that was the drawback for the narrator. He was there pretty early, and the place Darchan had no pilgrims. When the narrator arrived there, he was a bit early. That was the issue. And there is one question also related to this particular part in your book. So keep this in mind. One afternoon, I was pondering my options over a glass of tea in Darchan's only cafe. After a little consideration, I concluded they were severely limited. Clearly, I hadn't made much progress with my self-help program on positive thinking. So even when the narrator was very positive that something good will happen, but nothing good actually came out because he was all alone in this place. He could not move forward because there were no other pilgrims, and that is when he was thinking what to do. Pondering is thinking, the word in the first line. In my defense, it hadn't been easy with all my sleeping difficulties. But however I looked at it, I could only wait. The pilgrimage trail was well trodden, but I didn't fancy doing it alone. The Kora was seasonal because parts of the route were liable to blockage by snow. I had no idea whether or not the snow had cleared, but I wasn't encouraged by the chunks of dirty ice that still clung to the banks of Darchan's brook. Since Chetan had left, I hadn't come across anyone in Darchan with enough English to answer even the most basic question. So the thing was that he could see that the snow was there, and he could guess that on the trail, the path to the Kora, there might be snow, and that is why he could not move ahead alone. He needed a company, he needed a group. Until that is, so he was all alone, he had no other options. Then he met this man, Norbu. The cafe was small, dark, and cavernous, with a long metal stove that ran down the middle. So I'll show you a cafe of this type. As you can see here, a very small cafe, not very well furnished, not very beautiful, not very posh, a very simple cafe in a very small town, you can say. So he met Norbu and he was sitting in the cafe. The walls and ceiling were wreathed in sheets of multicolored plastic that I showed you previously, of the striped variety, broad blue, red and white, that is made into stout, voluminous shopping bags sold all over China and in many other countries of Asia as well as Europe. As such, plastic must rate as one of China's most successful exports along the Silk Road today. The cafe had a single window beside which I had taken up position so that I could see the pages of my notebook. I had also brought a novel with me to help pass the time. So the narrator was sitting in Darchan's only cafe when he met Norbu. Norbu saw my book when he came in and asked with a gesture if he could sit opposite me at my rickety table. Rickety table, let me show you. That is a rickety table. A rickety table doesn't have fixed legs. One of them might not be working properly and the table keeps on moving and bumping, and there is bouncing also. So when the table is not steady, that is a rickety table. Well, moving forward. You English? He inquired after he had ordered tea. I told him I was, and we struck up a conversation. I didn't think he was from those parts because he was wearing a wind cheater and metal-rimmed spectacles of a Western style. So when the narrator looked at Norbu, his attire, his glasses, wind cheater, the narrator realized that this man did not belong to that particular area. He belonged to some other place, maybe a city. And that is when the narrator asked and came to know that Norbu was a Tibetan. He told me, but worked in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. I assumed he was on some sort of field work. Yes and no, he said. I have come to do the Kora. My heart jumped. The narrator was very happy because he finally found a companion. Norbu had been writing academic papers about the Kailash Kora and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature for many years. He told me, but he had never actually done it himself, and that is why he wanted to do the Kora, and that is why he was there in Darchan. When the time came for me to tell him what brought me to Darchan, his eyes lit up. We could be a team, he said excitedly. Two academics who have escaped from the library. Perhaps my positive thinking strategy was working after all. So this proves that The narrator's positive thinking was actually working because he actually found a companion. My initial relief at meeting Norbu, who was also staying in the guest house, was tempered by the realization that he was almost as ill-equipped as I was for the pilgrimage. So they were very happy, but the problem was that I'm sorry, that both of them were not very well equipped for the pilgrimage. He kept telling me how fat he was and how hard it was going to be. Very high up, he kept reminding me, so tiresome to walk. He wasn't really a practicing Buddhist, it transpired. But he had enthusiasm and he was, of course, a Tibetan. So he wasn't a very devout kind of believer. He was not a very practicing Buddhist also, but he wanted to do the Kora. Although I had originally envisaged making the trek in the company of devout believers, on reflection I decided that perhaps Norbu would turn out to be the ideal companion. So let's go through this particular part. Envisage means to imagine or expect something in the future, especially something good. Train fare increases of 15% are envisaged for the next year. And when we say that devout believer, the narrator wanted to go to the pilgrimage with the devout believers. When you look at these people who are here praying, completely bowing in front of the temple, these are the devout believers. They follow each and every custom. They follow each and every ritual. They believe a lot in the God and the power of God. And then there are the common people who believe in God, who belong to a religion, but cannot be called as very religious. So the narrator wanted to complete his journey with devout believers so that he could learn about each and every aspect of the pilgrimage. But then he thought that Norbu might be a better option for him. Norbu would turn out to be the ideal companion. He suggested we hire some yaks to carry our luggage, which I interpreted as a good sign. And he had no intention of prostrating himself all round the mountain. Not possible, he cried, collapsing across the table in hysterical laughter. It wasn't his style, and anyway, his tummy was too big. So it was very clear that Norbu and the narrator, they are going to go there together, and they decided to hire some yaks for carrying their luggage, and they would walk, and they would not always sit along, as was clear by Norbu that he would not always sit on the yak, but he would love to walk also. And that is when he started laughing hysterically. Ha 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 ha. You know, the person doesn't stop and you're very surprised at how the person is laughing like that. That is what is hysterical laughter is. And with this laughter, the chapter comes to an end. This is a travelogue, only a part of it. We do not know much. We do not know what happened before Rahu, and we do not know what happened after Darshan. In our syllabus, there is a part of the travelogue. And when it comes to this end, we come to know that how the positive thinking of the narrator actually worked in the end, and he found a companion. So today I'm going to close this chapter with this particular quote: think positive, be positive, and positive things will happen. The same happened to the narrator. He found a companion and he could continue with his journey. So with this, let us close the chapter. Thanks a lot for listening and going through it with me. Thank you.